100 years after the signing of the Declaration of Independence, a great centennial exposition was held here in Philadelphia to celebrate the industrial independence of the United States. Visitors of the world marveled at the ingenuity of American inventors. The main hall was a wonderland of giant steam engines, lathes, and farm machinery, which visitors viewed with awe. Most intriguing were the new, revolutionary creations of American inventors. Alexander Graham Bell's telephone was one of the most remarkable of all. Bell had taught in a school for the deaf. It was his intimate knowledge of the physics of speech, as well as electricity, which enabled Bell to invent the telephone. Asked to state his profession, Bell invariably replied, "I am a teacher of the deaf." In 1892, using this desk and telephone, Bell sent his voice from New York to Chicago. Improvements followed until by 1900, over 1.5 million telephones were carrying voices of America across the land. Wrecks on the early railroads took a heavy toll in lives and property due largely to faulty brakes. Brakemen had to rush to each car to tighten a hand-wound brake. A train would coast a half-mile before stopping. In 1869, George Westinghouse halted a train a few feet short of a frightened horse. After this demonstration of the new Westinghouse automatic air brakes attached to each car and controlled by the engineer, railroads became safer throughout the world. Versatile George Westinghouse also perfected the block signal system to move trains with speed and safety. He harnessed Niagara Falls and was the first to use alternating current in power plants. Success came to Thomas Edison through a lifetime of self-teaching and hard work. At 10, he tinkered with chemistry. At 12, he worked as a newsboy. At 15, he saved a child's life, and the father taught him telegraphy. While an expert telegrapher, he continued to experiment. In 1876, Edison built a laboratory in Menlo Park, New Jersey, with funds earned by his early inventions. Employing 100 men, he established a pattern for research laboratories of the future. Said Edison, "I want none of the rich man's toys. What I want is a perfect workshop." He went on to develop an electrical lighting system for home and industry. Edison's patent model for electric lights was filed in 1879. Others had experimented with electric lamps, but Edison found a filament after testing 1,600 fibers. Then he designed commercial power plants, dynamos, wiring systems, and a durable, low-cost light bulb. This was the first house in the world to be lighted with electric lamps. Here in the Jordan boarding house, Edison's men lived and ate their meals. Light wires were strung from Edison's laboratory to light the street and the boarding house. In this dining room, electric lights were placed in the old kerosene lamp. The light the men enjoyed soon brightened the homes of America and the world. A great electrical industry was rising to furnish power to build America. The U.S. Patent Office granted Edison over 1,000 patents in his lifetime, including the phonograph in 1877. It was a new concept for recording and reproducing human speech. Edison went on to invent the kinetoscope, forerunner of our motion picture industry. Edison credited his friend George Eastman with timely help on the kinetoscope. Formerly, pictures were made on metal or glass plates, a slow, cumbersome process. In 1884, Eastman revolutionized photography by inventing a flexible photographic film. Photographic paper and film is produced today on an enormous scale. 15-year-old George Eastman, working as a messenger boy at $3 per week and later as a young bank clerk, used his meager savings to found Eastman Kodak, a great American industry. George Eastman's discoveries benefited education and science. He also gave his fortune of $100 million to clinics and universities, One received $20 million anonymously. He was one of the first to grant profit sharing to his employees. Other inventions stimulated education. The linotype was patented in 1884 by a German immigrant, Ottmar Mergenthaler. It cast impressions of type on a metal slug, which was used in printing presses. In 1895, the Bowery in New York at night was a gay scene. Electric streetcars driven by Westinghouse motors, stores brightly lit by Edison power stations, elevated railroads made safe by air brakes, all reflected the promising future of America. Before the Civil War, most businesses were small enough to be run by father and son, brothers, or a small partnership. But as the nation grew, more workers, more management, and more capital were required. This led to the organization of corporations. Some corporations began with an invention, such as Eastman's first camera. People formed a group to furnish money or capital to build a factory. They were given shares or stock in an organization called a corporation. The stockholders elected directors who selected managers to run the business. This is the essence of the capitalistic system. With increasing business, a very large factory developed. Thousands of employees were hired. Employees received wages for their labor. Stockholders received dividends for the use of their money, if and when there was a profit. Electrical geniuses such as Dr. C.P. Steinmetz, an immigrant from Germany, joined Edison's corporation, which became the great General Electric Company. Competition forced corporations to assemble some of the world's ablest scientists. Poorly equipped small oil businesses seemed wasteful to young John D. Rockefeller. He invested his savings, organized a corporation in 1870, and brought many companies under one efficient management. It became the giant Standard Oil Company. One of the richest men in the world, Rockefeller lived simply and quietly. He devoted his life to giving his fortune to the advancement of health, education, and restoration of many historic sites in America and throughout the world. His first large donation was to the University of Chicago. Andrew Carnegie, another corporation pioneer, had been a poor, thrifty immigrant boy from Scotland. Working hard since 14, he used his savings to buy into a small iron business, believing that America would soon become a giant of iron and steel. Carnegie beat his rivals in building steel bridges to replace those of wood after the Civil War. With rising profits, he organized a corporation, bought other steel mills, also iron and coal mines, railroads, and ships, increasing the efficiency of his corporation. 100 mills of the Carnegie Company produced 1/4 of America's steel. In 1901, Carnegie sold his holdings to J.P. Morgan and other bankers, who consolidated more steel companies to form the giant United States Steel Corporation, America's first billion-dollar business. Thousands of American communities today have public libraries started with funds donated by Andrew Carnegie, who gave away $350 million to promote education and world peace. In this Detroit machine shop, Henry Ford built his first automobile in 1896. Ford's success did not come easily. He worked 10 hours per day for $3.50 per week as a machine apprentice, and from 7 to 11 at night with a jeweler to earn enough for room and board. Ford's first car was small and light. He was the first to make the automobile a public means of transportation instead of a luxury. With minimum cost and upkeep, Ford put America on wheels and quickened the rise of one of America's greatest industries. With 15 million Model T Fords, he revolutionized mass production by introducing the moving assembly line. Ford then nearly doubled the average minimum industrial wage to provide greater incentive, efficiency, and buying power. Other billion-dollar corporations, such as General Motors, followed in the wake of Ford's success. Millions of employees and stockholders in the automobile industry now enjoy the world's highest standard of living because of American ingenuity, enterprise, and freedom. Along the Brandywine River near Wilmington, Delaware, many grist and textile mills operated during the Revolutionary War. In 1802, E.I. DuPont, a French immigrant experienced in making gunpowder, established a new important industry here on the Brandywine. Water wheels, connected by large wooden shafts to 10-ton iron rollers, ground a mixture of saltpeter, sulfur, and charcoal, the ingredients of gunpowder. The mixture then became a dangerously explosive powder cake. "21 rolling mills still stand between the raceway, which fed the water wheels and the Brandywine River. Built of heavy stone walls, the side facing the river was left open to allow an accidental explosion to dissipate harmlessly across the river. From these DuPont mills came much of the explosives used in building canals, highways, and in the nation's wars. In 1921, the powder yards were replaced by a giant new DuPont industrial complex. It was started here over 150 years ago. Today, the DuPont Corporation, with nearly 100 factories, is a world-famous manufacturer of not only explosives, but also dyes, plastics, paints, rayon, cellulose film, fabrics, and many chemicals, a great and self-sufficient American industry. In this small shop, Wilbur and Orville Wright repaired bicycles and made and experimented with glider models. They also built a 12-horsepower gasoline engine, a frail biplane, and went to the windswept coast of North Carolina determined to fly. Leaving the greased runway on the sands at Kitty Hawk, the plane rose, dipped, and rose again. It remained in the air 59 seconds and covered 800 feet. That December day in 1903 marked man's first successful flight in an engine-powered, heavier-than-air machine. The original Wright brothers airplane now hangs in the Smithsonian Institution at Washington, the proud symbol of their courage and skill. Their epical flight gave birth to the gigantic aviation industry of today. Close by hangs the original Spirit of St. Louis, flown across the Atlantic by Charles Lindbergh alone in 1927. Americans have indeed blazed many trails for all the world to follow. Big corporations and little businesses provide the power and well-being of America. Millions of stockholders, many colleges, insurance companies, and company employees are today investor capitalists, blessed by America's free enterprise system. In the earlier years, workers rebelled at oppressively low wages, the long 12-hour day, the bad lighting and sanitary conditions in the factories. In 1869, a labor union, the Knights of Labor, was organized to improve the situation. The year 1877 saw a bitter railroad strike. Many lives were lost and millions of dollars in property damage resulted. In 1886, the American Federation of Labor, known as the AFL, was organized to champion the cause of the working people. For 37 years, Samuel Gompers, president of the AFL, was labor's crusader and defender of American ideals. Factories were made safer, the 8-hour day recognized, benefit programs adopted, and collective bargaining replaced many harmful disputes. Later, from headquarters in Washington, the AFL and the Committee for Industrial Organization, known as the CIO, cooperated with the railroad brotherhoods, the United Mine Workers, and other unions to mediate and compromise in the democratic American way. After 1880, Negro citizens began increased participation in American education, industry, and government. Leaders of the Tuskegee Institute, including Booker T. Washington, its founder, and George Washington Carver, its able scientist, Frederick Douglass, a noted writer, and many others, played important parts in national development. Immigrants played a vital role in the building of America. After 1840, their numbers increased in answer to glowing advertisements in Europe of factory owners who needed workers. Many poor, oppressed, and hopeful people flocked to this land of opportunity. Up to 1890, through Castle Garden, immigrant depot in New York, 7 million people poured into America. Later, to Ellis Island in New York Harbor, came 20 million more, cherishing more than life the freedom of America. From Ireland, Germany, France, Italy, Scandinavia, Poland, and Russia came laborers, farmers, doctors, engineers, and scientists. Such men as Slater, Carnegie, DuPont, Steinmetz, and Gompers are but a few who were great contributors to American enterprise. Some immigrants went westward to help build railroads or to obtain cheaper land and clear the wilderness. Others went to the cities or Midwest farms. By 1921, it became necessary to establish quotas and standards by which people could enter the United States. Many Americans were immigrants, as were the Jamestown colonists from England. Later, more came from Holland, Germany, and France. Today, from the venturesome, determined hearts of our foreign-born, we have inherited much of America's greatness. To the whole world, America became the land of promise. We are proud and grateful for the industrious and courageous people who greeted the Statue of Liberty, bursting with joy and thankfulness, and who came to help us create a mighty nation.